Since I already have Python installed, I'm gonna reinstall Python in a virtual machine. So a VirtualBox is basically an application that lets me install software on top of Windows as a virtual environment. Therefore, here I don't have Python installed versus on my current system I do have Python installed. Okay, so to install Python, we basically go online and get to python.org. This is basically where we're gonna get Python. If you go to downloads, notice that the latest one today is 3.9.1. However, in my system, I have 3.8. Therefore, I'm gonna install 3.8 as well, just to be able to keep projects the same way. You can install whichever you want. If you have Mac, you're probably gonna have to go and install it anyways on this particular link. But I'm going to use Windows because my system is Windows 64. Windows, I'm going to look for the executable installation. If you plan to develop Python libraries, then you can get something else, the zip file developer option. But I just want to use my Python executable to install 3.8.2 and be able to run the codes. Okay, so right here is Windows executable installer. We have the help, the base, executables, download, embedded. This one is the one I want. Executable. All right, 3.8.2. Gonna go ahead and install now. Okay, so first thing is I chose 3.8 because I want to be able to use the path for any Python file to be able to link it to my project. So I'm gonna click here. You don't have to, but I want to be able to use the Python 3.8 for any Python file. The reason is because I use some libraries for my projects that are developed in 3.8 and some are not yet developed for 3.9. That is pretty much one downfall of open source, but again, you're not paying anything. So you just basically have to do your research beforehand and investigate what version works best for you. So we're gonna do, if you do install now, it will take it to app data, local programs. It's pretty long address. So I'm gonna go ahead and install it in a custom. Sorry, I'm gonna go ahead and install there. Yes. So we're gonna go ahead and install the default library. Okay, it's gonna take a little bit. And I'm gonna pause it and be back whenever it's done. Successful. Okay, close, close. Now you have an app which is 3.8, where it's basically showing exactly what we did before. A equals 1, B equals 2, and now we don't have to say C equals nothing, we'll just go ahead and test. There's another way of saying C equals, and what we want, which is A times B. All right, Python works. You have successfully installed Python 3.8.2 or whichever version you decided to install. This is for Windows. If you have a Mac, go ahead and do exactly the same steps, but go to the Mac option. Now, we have Python installed, but remember that we don't have access to cosine or math functions, which are crucial for most engineering code. So for that, we have to install packages. But before we do that, we're going to go ahead and install the IDE. The integrated development environment that I like to use is PyCharm. Therefore, I'll close this and find PyCharm. All right, so PyCharm is developed by JetBrains. This is pretty much the website right here. So PyCharm has a free version and it has a version that they charge for. So obviously we're gonna get the free version, but if you're planning to develop apps and make money out of your code, you're probably going to have to get the edition where you pay if you're using PyCharm, but pretty much that's how it works. So we're gonna go to downloads and we're going to get the free version for Windows, which is Community. Okay, so for Mac you would have to get Jupyter, because PyCharm does not run on Mac, I don't think. So let's install it for Windows and then I can make a video for Linux, which is similar to Mac in a way, but over there you can also go on Google, YouTube, and find out the instructions to install on Mac, because it's simpler, it's easier than installing programs on IDEs on Windows. So your best bet is to go for Jupyter, but bear with me, and Windows users, go ahead and get PyCharm. Okay, so no, I don't need to do any of this. I want to get, so let's go back to downloads. This is the page that is taking me, community, free, open source. Yes, close this, subscribe. Your download should start shortly. If it doesn't, please. Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and pause this one. I'm gonna wait for it to download. So we have PyCharm already downloaded. Then we're gonna go ahead and install the IDE. So first thing is wait for it to run. Yes. Next. Okay, so where do you want to install? This is your option. You can do my documents, so program files, delete JetBrains, just put PyCharm. So I'm okay with this. Remember, I'm using a virtual machine, and this is only to show you how to install it. I already have it installed on my local machine, and I've tailored this as the way I like it. So for now, this is next important part. So we have to decide your structure. Mine is 64-bit. I want all the Python files that I have on my system to be able to be recognized and opened by default on PyCharm. That's okay. Yes, that's fine. And then we're gonna wait for it to install. Once it has finished, you will, if you want to launch it, you can just go ahead and click here. If not, then finish. I'm not going to open it just yet because I want to install my environment. So remember that Python is an interpreted language, therefore you basically build an environment where you run it. So this part right here is basically one of the most important parts and many people miss. Therefore, let's do it the right way. I'm going to build my environment on a very common platform called Conda. So for that, we're basically going to install one more thing, the last thing. We already installed Python, and we already installed PyCharm, which is the IDE. Now we are going to install Conda. Now, to install Anaconda, we simply go to anaconda.com, click on Get Started, download Anaconda installers, and choose your operative system. Mine is Windows and 64-bit. So I already clicked there. I have downloaded the file. I did it in advance because it does take a little bit. So go ahead and choose your operating system and download the executable. I'm gonna go ahead and install Anaconda for my system, 64-bit Windows. So go ahead and do next. I agree. Just for me, all the users, I'm the only one, but you can choose either or, depending on what you want. Yes. C programmed in Anaconda 3, that is fine. 3 is because it's Python 3. So if you have not installed Python before, you could click there, but notice how the font is red now. We have already installed Python, so we don't have to reinstall any other variable paths. Therefore, we're gonna go with this option that is the default. I'm gonna say install, and we're going to wait for it to finish. We have finished installing Anaconda. Next. And I don't want to start any of this. Finish. Okay, now if you check, do conda anaconda, you have installed the prompt, right? So you have also installed Python 3.8, and you have also installed PyCharm. Okay. Now, why we need to install Anaconda and do all this? It's because we're trying to install virtual environments, and so far we haven't done anything in Python, but we just want to set up the whole environment. So I wanted to install Conda because Python is open source and the scientific community has worked together to develop libraries to enhance and facilitate the development of code. Therefore, if you want to do Python, if you want to use Python to investigate quantum physics or quantum computing, you would have package called PyQuil. If you have statistical analysis, you can use pandas. I'm sure some of them are already familiar. SciPy, which I'm going to be installing here. If you want to do image processing, you can do a package for that. If you want to do symbolic computing, then you do SymPy, kind of like what you would do with Maple or Mathematica, so on and so forth. If you want to do mathematical analysis, you can do SymPy and SPy. So different types of packages are developed that you would just bring into Python and you would be able to use them. So if you want to do linear algebra, you would use SymPy, right? If you want to do chemical analysis, I've never used this one before, but there's somebody already developed it and published its results, and it's open source for you to download. If you ever develop a code, a package, library for Python, you can name it whatever you want, put it out for the public to use, and that's how Python community contributes and builds on top of previous libraries. Okay, so since we want to be able to use all these things, which is one of the main reasons why Python is so powerful and common, then for us to use it, we have to do the setup that we are currently using. So we want to set up the environment where we are able to download those packages. Okay, so here you would have to go to create your first environment, which the way to do this would be type in conda, which is what we just installed, create dash name. So this is where we're going to do right here for the name of the environment. You can pretty much write whatever name you want. Hopefully something that you can remember, because when you create more than one environment, then you have to, hopefully the name is intuitive enough for you to recognize which environment is going to be using what code. So let's say we can call it Py intro. Okay, PyIntro. Okay, that's my name. But 3.8 because we have Python 3.8. Therefore, for Python to know that is using Python 3.8, you would write after the name, you write Python 3.8. So if you installed 3.9 right here, you would put Python equals 3.9 and your name could be whatever you want, PyIntro 3.9. So this will create the environment. Okay. Yes. Just wait for it to finish. Activate, it is created. So to activate the environment, you would type conda activate and the name of your environment, which we called PyIntro 338. It's right here. Py, capital P, capital Y, capital I, intro, PyIntro 38. That was the name of my environment. All right, so notice that now the environment is created and we're basically ready to install all the libraries that we want. So I want to install libraries to perform mathematical calculations. So what I need to be installing is NumPy, as we just looked online, numpy.org. I want to be installing NumPy, and for that, we will type, and to install NumPy, we type conda install NumPy. It's retrieving the JSON file, yes. And it's going to take a little bit. And we wait for it. All right. I also want to use my plotting libraries so I can create scatter plots and I can create graphs. Therefore, I'm going to use SciPy. For that, we go and say conda install SciPy. Yes. Following packages will be installed. Okay. Just wait for it to finish. My environment, if you forgot something now and you activate your environment, but later you realize that you want something else because you get an error when you run it, then you come back to conda and you do exactly the same thing. Conda activate environment name. If it's already activated, you do conda install, and we're gonna do pandas for statistical analysis and file managing. Conda install pandas. Yes. Okay, so I think I have all the environments that I need. Therefore, I'm gonna go ahead and create my first code, Python code, and I'm gonna use my IDE that I just installed. So we're gonna go to PyCharm. Continue. I don't send. Okay, so before anything, notice that if you go to your file browser, you can look on your users that there's a file called .conda, and then there's a folder called, sorry, under your username there's a folder called .conda, and then under that folder you're going to find another folder called enbs environments, and then you have your environment created. Now this folder has all the files that you have created for the, and the links and the functions that you need for your environment to run properly. So you go ahead and check if you want what's the size. It could be pretty big depending on the amount of libraries that you end up installing. So it created a bunch of libraries, dynamic libraries, DLLs, and Python files that you are going to be calling from your PyCharm to create your environment. Okay, so all this was created under my PyIntro 38. When you create another environment from Conda, it will be right here, and all the environments to interpret your code will be saved under that environment. All right, so when we go to PyCharm, we want to call that environment. How you do that is, first of all, you create a new project because we don't have a project to open. So you go to new, and you're basically gonna name your project. So intro to Python with let's say 38, Python 38. Okay, so that's the name of my project. Now to call my environment, we name our project intro dash Python 38, and notice that it says no Python interpreter selected. Okay, so here was the virtual environment that PyCharm has by default, but we created a specific environment, and we have to find it under previously configured interpreter. So the name of our project will be intro Python 38 right here. You can name it whatever you want. And then instead of new environment using virtual environment from PyCharm, we're gonna do a previously configured interpreter. So go there. Now notice that you have Conda environment, okay? And you have to find the environment that we created. So it's under your disk, C, Conda, environments, Python 3.8. Oh, okay, but I forgot that I am working on my VirtualBox. The name of my disk is C, right? Yes, so I go to users, Carlo, Conda, environments, PyIntro 3.8. Yes, making sure that I was not configuring the environment from my actual computer, which was installed months back, is the one that I'm installing today. So is this one, PyIntro 3.8 and Python executable. So what you have to find is this Python executable application where your environment has been created. Okay? Okay. Perfect. So Python 3.8, the name of your interpreter is PyIntro 3.8. Very good. Create. Perfect. You can go over the tips if you want. You don't need to very well. So you have your PyCharm application IDE. So to create your file to run, you're gonna go to name of your environment, right click, new, Python file, and intro code 1. Enter, because the .py, the Python extension, will be added by PyCharm. So it's right here. So if you do A equals 1 and B equals 2 and do C equals A plus B, and if you do print C, notice that now we're doing exactly the same thing that we did before. So run, the code that I created, which is intro code 1, C equals 3. So I like IDE that I installed because for a long code I can do debug. You can actually go over each line and show you the values of each variable. So now I'll run it again. Beautiful. C equals 3. Now we installed NumPy. How do we know if it's working? So import NumPy as np. And now capital A equals np, which is NumPy, zeros. There you go. Look at IDE, PyCharm knows that I am accessing the functions built in NumPy. If you tried to do this before installing NumPy and the environment, the virtual environment, you wouldn't be able to get this done because NumPy is installed from the environment. So zeros, and then you're gonna do, let's say 5 by 5. This is a matrix of 5 by 5. And then let's do run debug. Run it first. Very well, no errors. What is A? There we go. That's your 5 by 5 with zeros. So recap. We have installed Python 3.8.2. We have installed PyCharm, which is the IDE, this developer where we're able to create our Python projects. And we have installed Anaconda to create the virtual environments where we create our Python codes to interpret and run it. Now, I'm going to right here put some comments. Comment is right here where we say installed Python 3.8.2. So the comment is not going to be turned into instructions for the code. Comments are for the programmer to be able to document what it's done, for other programmers to be able to open the code and understand what is going on. So also installed PyCharm and installed Anaconda, so that to create virtual environments. All right. So another way of creating comments is with here quotation marks would create a block of comments. Right here you create only one line of comment with a hashtag, but if you want a block of comments you would create these quotation marks. So any questions, email me at carlos.acosta2@utsa.edu. Thank you.